everyone. I'm Melody Maraca.
And I'm Bill C.
Welcome back to the Into the Heart of U2 podcast, where two longtime fans discuss U2 music album by album and tour by tour, the fan experience, and the perception of U2 in cultural consciousness.
Right. Melody and I, we came of age with U2. We saw it all happen in real time. And as we sit here in 2023, we still care about this band, but we're concerned about their legacy. So as we take a trip back through the band's history, we're going to try and place it in proper context and ultimately get to the bottom of whether U2 is one of the greats of all time or are the haters right after all.
For this episode, we're going to take a break from our regular album by album historical programming and talk about U2 show at the Sphere in Las Vegas. Yay.
I'm sorry.
Now that we've both actually seen the show, I was particularly excited to do this episode since we saw two different shows in two very different locations of the building, with me up in the 300 level and you on the floor. And frankly, I just thought this episode might be fun to discuss the shows while they're still happening.
But first, I wanted to give a shout out to some of the kind folks who have reached out and let us know they're enjoying the podcast. So we're really grateful for that.
We are indeed.
And this was especially the case as I was tweeting from the show last Friday, which is not really my jam, but it was fun and people were very responsive. And they said, hey, you should do a Sphere show. So we figured, hey, why not have Edit, right?
And I've got to point out here that Bill, you're the one that scooped the whole thing that you two were playing the war songs, Seconds and Sunday Bloody Sunday. So I'm just saying it. You scooped it.
Well, I got a unicorn set list, didn't I? In Melody, you saw a fairly early show. I think it was October 8th, was it not?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I saw last Friday, November 2nd. So anyway, we're winging this episode, friends of the podcast. So we're a little more free form. Melody, where should we go at this point?
I have to say that before I went to the show, I had some concerns. I think you did too. Yeah. Some of the things I was thinking about was the spectacle of it all going to overpower the band? Of course, we didn't know what the spectacle was going to be before the show, but that was something I was concerned about. And then also, no matter what the Edge says, it is Las Vegas residency. That really is what's going on here. And I was concerned whether it was going to feel more like a residency than a U2 show. So how about you, Bill? What were some of your concerns?
Yeah, I not only had the concerns, I voiced them on our manifesto episode, as you recall, which we recorded right before this whole run of shows at the Sphere started. And I feel like, in fairness, that now that I've seen the show, I should address some of what I said at that time. One thing I said was U2 doing a Vegas residency was like them doing their Fat Elvis period, and with Adele, Katy Perry, Britney Spears doing Vegas residencies is kind of like, instead of touring, it seemed to me that no matter how spectacular visually the Sphere shows would be, it felt like U2 was following others rather than doing what they always had done, which was being at the forefront of innovation with respect to the concert experience. Now, having seen the show, I have to say maybe that had been a little rash, and we'll get to all this. But I also said that I was afraid that these residencies were a sign of things to come, that it could mark an end to touring as we've known it. And, artists, they could just, set up shop, and then it's up to the fans of the world to fly in at their expense and come and see the band. And, when you think about it, we covered this in our Zoo TV episode. U2 was spending something like $200,000 a day, whether it was a show or not, on their dime, at a time when they had not reconciled issues of, corporate sponsorship. And so now, fast forward now, we've got Madison Square Garden building this fabulous thing for $2 billion some odd dollars. And U2 can, over the course of 6 months, fly in 3 times a week, play for a couple hours a show, and the overhead is comparatively low. And let's not forget, when they're not playing, the Sphere is this probably one of the greatest pieces of advertising in the history of marketing.
Right, right. And I think that these are the types of questions that we're going to get into and discuss a little bit later.
Well, leave it to me and Melody to jump ahead.
I kind of wanted to talk about just the ticketing experience. Now, you and I had very different experiences here as well. I was fortunate that I was able to snag tickets through the fan club sale.
Right.
So I was lucky. I got them at face value. It was great. But I know you had a different experience, and you purchased tickets through Vibi, which I'll just say, I didn't know this about Vibi. They are a Live Nation company. They were just launched in April of 2023. They're billed as a, quote, music-led destination experience company that will transform the way fans travel and connect with their favorite artists, which kind of, I think talks, it kind of plays into what you're saying about the future of touring. But there were a lot of complaints about Vibi. I know a lot of fans were talking about the lack of transparency, slow release of distributing tickets. They weren't very communicative with answering questions of fans that had purchased tickets. Did you have any of these issues? And then did you enjoy any of the perks that you were supposed to get with these Vibi packages?
Let me back up. I also, being a member of U2.com fan club, longtime member, I did the attempt that you did and everyone else, old fans did. I tried to get them the legitimate way. I've seen this band for 40 years, going back every tour, and I did not get a ticket, not one ticket, never got through. And so basically, I will only defend the fact that I did a douchey thing, buying the idiotic Vibi package, because I was so pissed off. And maybe I should have said, screw this entirely, but it's like, I want to be on the floor and I don't want to put up with this, and I'm going to fall victim to it. Okay, so please direct your hatred to me on Twitter or Instagram. I am a fool. But I refused to wear that ridiculous laminate. And I was not going to go to any goddamn cocktail party. And I thought the Zoo Station was substandard. The merchandise was unacceptable and uncool and too expensive. And no, I didn't enjoy any of it.
Alrighty. So I talked to some folks who were happily wearing their lanyard when I was there, when I visited Zoo Station, and they had a great time and they really enjoyed.
God love them.
Yeah, and that is cool. I didn't like Zoo Station either. I thought it was packed. It was a gift shop. There were some really cool things to take pictures with, but I didn't want to wait in line myself. I didn't want to wait in line an hour to do the photo booth. But I saw some multi-generational folks, families together who were having a fine time, and God bless them. And I know that some people loved it, and that's cool. It wasn't for me either.
Right. Again, listen, if you, I'm not being judgy. I'm saying this is my experience. If you loved it, go for it. It's fine. Go for it. Listen, you paid for it. Enjoy it. I paid for it, and I did it for one thing, and that's to get the floor seats. And, we stayed in the Venetian. I don't like Vegas, Melody. You know this very well. I've been there many times for you two and for pleasure. And there wasn't much pleasure. I don't love the place. So
what was your experience when you first walked into the Sphere? How'd you feel?
The funny thing about it is there was nothing rock and roll about entering the Sphere for me. It felt like we were going into some sort of Star Wars thing, at Disneyland or something. It was very quiet. There isn't the telltale signs of a rock and roll with the urine and sound and vomit and people screwing in the bathroom. None of that. It's very clean. And then, as I said, long hallway, and then, the opening. And then for me on the floor, of course, it's this towering, overwhelming monstrosity, and I felt like a little ant. But it immediately hit me. My God, I get it now, because you see the YouTube clips, doesn't do it justice.
It doesn't. Although I have to say, I had a different experience. I didn't walk in through the Venetian, which I think is the way that most people get there.
Right.
A member of my party had some ambulatory issues, so we paid a ridiculous amount of money for parking. Ridiculous. It was like $120. Yes,
What?
man, $120. Yeah, it was $100 flat. Ticketmaster charged $20 fee.
Oh
Not
my
kidding.
God, I did
Yeah.
not know that.
I know I didn't tell you that until I wanted to
Bastards.
tell you that. Anyway, so we spent a lot of money and we were parked
Jesus.
really close, which was we needed to be. But anyway,
No, I
so
get that.
yeah, so we walked through and I thought that was a cool building. I know what you mean by it's very futuristic, which it is, and it's very quiet. It's very quiet.
Very quiet.
Very quiet. There's so many people near you and it's very quiet.
Yes.
But I thought it was cool. I thought it was I liked the futuristicness of it. I liked the color, the gray color scheme. I liked it. And I have to tell you, I had heard that it was incredibly soundproof, right? From the inside to the outside. So I was kind of like looking forward to that, walking down the hallway to get to the inside of the Sphere. And I'm a dork, Bill. I did it a couple times because it was so cool to walk from this little quiet space to all of a sudden, all this noise and you can hear all this music. So I did it twice. I thought it was cool. But yeah, I had the same experience that you did. I was very overwhelmed by it. I think, literally maybe the jaw dropped by seeing this metallic silo looking screen and kind of that merged with the Pantheon, I guess.
Yeah.
When you're looking up towards the ceiling. So cool. And yeah, the pictures don't actually do it justice, which I feel bad saying that because I think maybe some people are listening can't go to the show. And I do feel bad about that. But it's a very overwhelming feeling.
And that whole issue of there is a segment of the fan base who can't afford it or get to it is part of the discussion. I think that must be said.
Absolutely. Even if you're talking about face value tickets.
Yes.
Because, the least expensive tickets were at face $140, but you had to travel to Vegas. But we'll talk about that, like you said.
Right.
So I did think one of the things that was interesting about the Sphere is how different it felt to me from an arena. This felt like an oversized theater. That was my impression of what it felt like in there. I don't know if you felt similarly.
Combination of that and like an old opera house with that with the steep rise of the 300 and 400 section.
Right.
It kind of had that feel of old opera house.
Yeah. And then also it looked so different when you walk in there comparative to their other stages that they've done. That stage is tiny. And
it's not just tiny, it's sparse. It's so sparse. It's four lighting rigs and a turntable, we're told, is designed by Brian Eno. Right. Very sparse, no amps.
Right.
All of that is
completely
out of
clean.
Sight. Completely clean, exactly.
Yeah, it's actually elegant. The four lighting rigs that are behind the stage, they're very thin. Yeah. Very thin. Almost you wouldn't notice them. Really.
I think intentionally so that it doesn't get in the way of the visuals.
Right, exactly. But it was so different. Everything was so different than anything I'd ever seen in relation to U2 that I had absolutely, by the time I got into that building, I didn't know what to expect, which is a good place to be, actually.
Fair enough. Last thing I'll say before we get to the show is I was wondering, okay, so this is a Zoo TV, like Octune Baby, rather.
Octune Baby.
Anniversary, 2 years late because of COVID, of course. So I was wondering, okay, so what is the reference, or will there be any, or what kind of commemoration or harkening back? So that was the other thing I was wondering.
That's a good point,
and I was wondering if there was going to be any Zooropa. Those are the things that I was thinking going in.
So let's talk about the opening act, Polly Lovejoy, the PSM, who was DJing. No offense to Polly, because they really weren't doing much other than, driving around in a neon lit Trabi and spinning tunes. But I mean, frankly, it just wasn't my cup of tea. Thought it was a little dull.
Yeah. But to be fair, they're doing, some posing, TikTok or Instagram moments, doing what they're asked to do. For me, I'm on the floor and it was easy just to kind of go, hey, it's an 80s dance party. And people around me were, they were into it. But I understand why that wouldn't kind of float up into the 300 section. But yeah, very different experience on the floor. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Harmless.
Cool. Harmless. All right.
Yeah.
So I guess then we should go ahead and talk about the main event.
Okay.
Just to kind of set the stage a little bit, the show is really, there's 4 segments to it. There is what Bono, I think, refers to as side A of Octung Baby, even though they're not the songs that were on side A, but half of the record is played. Then there's an interlude of older songs. Bill, I think you were referring to it as the B stage, because that's how we would think of it, even though there isn't a B stage.
Right.
And then following that, the rest of Octung Baby's played, and then you have the encore.
Right.
But for me, that first segment of the show, I think you can kind of break it into 2 parts. There's the first 3 songs, which are the visual onslaught, and then there's the rest of it. So what did you think of those first 3 songs?
Well, first off, we had alluded to this in the Zoo TV episode, which I guess hasn't aired yet, so spoiler alert. But we had mentioned that it was kind of cool how Bono was coming out exactly like he did on the very first leg of the first Zoo TV tour leg, where he walks to center stage without any musical accompaniment, but for a drone, and he does what's been called the I Could Have Lost You intro, which for this run of shows is actually him singing I couldn't find you, where are you hiding from me, alone, I'm not alone, or something like that. And then it goes into Zoo Station. He's got the fly shades on. And then it goes into the fly, of course, and that uses a lot of the same affirmations, so to speak. Everything you know is wrong, that sort of thing. That is a big trope there. And then, of course, even better than the real thing, which you can weigh in on, which, of course, is probably the single most visually stimulating and psychedelic vertigo inducing moment of the show.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I think Zoo Station, one of the things to note is they do use some old images from the Zoo TV tour. The blue static, there's a couple other images they used that were recycled. So I think that was a nice note to start the show on. Certainly, as you mentioned, the truisms in the fly. But, even better than the real thing is certainly the most overwhelming. But those other 2 visuals, because you don't know what you're going to expect at that point. And even Zoo Station, when it looks like the screen, the wall behind the stage is cracking open into that white light cross, right?
Yeah.
It's incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
It was really well done. I have to say, though, for the fly, after the truisms are done and sort of the computer code, right? is kind of wrapping around the whole screen and the ceiling.
Oh, then ceiling falls.
Yeah, and then the ceiling falls. Yeah, the
Yeah.
computer code falls on everybody's
Right.
head. And I did wonder for a moment, I said, oh, is this going to be some sort of meditation on technology? That was actually my first thought. I wasn't right. That's not really what they're talking about. I mean, technology maybe in the sense of its relationship to consumerism, because that's kind of, I guess, examined visually, but that's
Yeah.
not really what it was about. So that was interesting to see that. And yeah, that ceiling falling kind of showing what the sphere could do was pretty cool. People screamed when the ceiling was coming down with the code on top of your head. It was very cool.
That was a very that was an aha moment.
How so?
Well, I mean, again, we had two different experiences. You're getting the full breadth of it up higher. I'm right underneath it on the floor, so it did have that, multidimensional kind of enveloping feeling. And of course, you've got the hole in the top of the sphere, so it's almost like this. It is definitely a futuristic kind of something you'd see in 2001, or
right,
something like that. It's like it's swallowing me.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and it was a really good. It was really good trickery because it really did feel like it was falling down on you. So, but certainly those two songs, and even better than the real thing. If at any time I felt that the sphere overpowered U2, it was those three songs for sure. Well, particularly even better than the real thing.
Right. U2 had a decision to make. And I'll just take it to an old favorite phrase of mine, which is, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Whether it be Pro Tools, hey, I've got 1 million tracks. Hey, let's add another cello or 100. Doesn't make the song better. And in the same sense, the technological advancements and options, an infinite number of options, does that mean you should use everything all the time? So it ultimately becomes a artistic choice and one of taste. So U2 had to face this, and this is probably my main concern going in. Yes, you've got all this. Yes, you can do it, but should you? And how much should you?
For sure. I agree with you. But I do think in those first three songs, it wasn't a bad idea to show off what the baby could do, right? Sure. And also, I thought that the images that they used were interesting. I mean, let's talk about even better than the real thing. So it's based on, I have some notes here. It's based on a piece called King Size by the artist's name is Marco Brambilla. Oh. And as a lot of people know, they've seen the images. It's multiple Elvises. You've got young Elvis, fat Elvis. It's images of Las Vegas, sort of from the golden era of Vegas, probably the early 60s. There's a lot of pop art in there. There's images of Disney, just different pop culture references. There was an image of Edge from the Pop Mart tour in there too. Okay. But it's so overwhelming because you have so many of these images. I think they're supposedly coming down from the ceiling, and then there's sort of spotlight images of the band that are floating upwards. So the effect feels like it looks like the stage is lifting off the ground. Yeah. And one person in my group really did have a short-term bout with vertigo following that. That's actually true. No pun intended there.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I thought about it was there was sort of almost, you mentioned psychedelic, but there was kind of almost a religiosity to it. The way that the images were coming down from the ceiling sort of in concentric circles, it sort of felt like a mandala almost to me, sort of like a circular geometric pattern that you would in Eastern religions that you would focus your meditation on.
Yeah.
I mean, it was overwhelming. It was incredible. And I've got to applaud them because it was a really good art piece.
Yeah, and so basically at this point at least I was thinking, okay, that was something. And now what? Is this the way it's all going to be? Because, my God, do I even need U2 on stage at this point? Or is this, just a visual oral stimulation exercise?
Right. And I was also at that point thinking, this sounds really different than a regular rock and roll concert. It was so clean, right? It sounded so clean. And Bono was so forward in the mix.
Yeah.
And the instruments were a little bit subdued.
Well, yeah. I mean, where I was, I actually got a lot of edge, which is very important and makes me happy.
Yeah.
But on the whole, I thought the mix was actually pretty tremendous, even on the floor. But I don't need super clean. I need something that feels live.
Agree. I agree with you. And that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It was so clean that somebody that I was with mentioned, hey, is this pre-recorded? Are they playing live? I mean, there was really you kind of wondered, like, are they playing live? And I thought, oh boy. And so that was when, even though I was overwhelmed by these images and I thought they were great, that's when the fears of, oh gosh, this is really going to be a residency. This isn't going to be a U2 show.
But actually, can I just say one thing? Because we've talked about the underworld on Zoo TV and how it became a bigger thing as tours went on. I will just say this. I could be wrong. I don't think there's a whole lot being added here. I was listening pretty hard for it. And of course, like Zoo TV, I'm sorry, Zoo Station, forgive me, always has that hum going on. That's obviously a sequencer. But there wasn't a whole lot added that I could tell, certainly comparatively on previous tours.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think for me, the big difference was how clean it sounded.
Yeah.
Bono didn't need to shout. Take The Fly, for example, which is that real conversational style of singing on record. He could do the same thing live. He could have that conversational style live. He wasn't fighting with it. He wasn't fighting with the room, right? He wasn't fighting with the sound system.
Sure.
And it was just, I think there was a momentary adjustment to, oh, this doesn't sound like another live show. This sounds really different. And it momentarily made me think that this was not going to be a great experience sonically. I changed my mind later in the show, though.
Do you want to, at this point, talk about Bono's voice?
That Bono's voice has aged? It shouldn't be any surprise.
No, certainly not. But it does go to legacy acts. You see them for a number of years. I mean, it's absurd to say, like, oh my God, he doesn't sound like he's 20. Oh, really? Well, what? Newsflash.
Right, exactly. Newsflash. Yeah,
he's 60.
Right.
But as we've talked, and you pointed out, there are certain singers, iconic singers, who lose their top half of the register entirely.
It's very common.
Bono has not. He may not be able to reach certain notes, but it's not like he doesn't have the upper register.
No, I mean, he does have his upper register. His voice has lowered. Most people's voices do lower as they get older. He's in his early 60s. It's completely normal. I think he's still quite a good singer.
Yeah.
I don't really understand the complaints. He can't hit the top range of his falsetto. He can't do it anymore. But it's a common thing. But yeah, no, I still think that he does a fine job.
In the last 2 or 3 tours, my only complaint has ever been like, it's been sometimes a little lazy with the phrasing. And not so much, oh my God, he's not singing like Heartland or something off Rattle and Hum 88.
Right.
It's more like, come on, don't give me a half-assed phrasing job here. Like, that's only been my concern. I didn't get as much of that here.
No, I think he did a great job, actually.
Yeah. What he's doing, though, is he will either obviously do it lower, or he will, let the crowd sing it, or like I said, or demure. It's not that shocking.
I got to tell you, it doesn't bother me. It's sort of, I mean, these guys are in their early 60s. Bono can't do some of the same physical stuff that he did before. I know a lot of people are complaining about that because he's not, when he was in his fly persona, right? That he didn't do the stuff that he did when he was 30 as the Fly. It's like, come on, he's not going to.
It probably would look silly.
It would look silly. Yeah. And he's almost doing like an homage to himself doing the Fly. I mean, it's not the Fly. It's that's not really what's happening.
All right, so let's move on. Where were we? We were
So the first three songs. So everybody's gobsmacked. Oh my gosh, what is this building going to do?
Yeah.
And then things start to calm down, I think, with Mysterious Ways and One.
Right. And of course, I suppose maybe there was a discussion. Hey, do we have a belly dancer? And I think it's smart to say, no, that would probably be a little silly and maybe a little creepy at this point in your life. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I mean, also, I just don't know that it would have worked for the staging.
Yeah.
And again, you mentioned earlier, everything was so clean.
Yeah.
I just don't think it would have worked, but I was glad for the calming of the visuals. I think that if the onslaught had continued,
it gets too kitschy.
Yeah, it gets too kitschy, and it's just overwhelming. You wouldn't hear the music. Yeah. So I was very glad to hear the music, but I thought that those two songs did a nice job of calming things down. And then when they did Unto the End of the World.
All right, before we go on to Until the End of the World, can I just say,
sure.
One, this is a song for me that in recent tours has felt a little mailed in. You'd mentioned New Year's Day or Pride, songs that feel maybe a little overdone. They lose their effectiveness. One maybe is that song for me, even though I love the song. I actually thought it was incredibly moving at the show I saw. Bono, I was trying to explain this to you off mic. I was close on this, and I saw him as like he's trying to like gather up and trying to assess what can I do here. Like it was actually, instead of like, oh my God, he can't do it. It was actually very moving because he felt taken by the moment, and he was trying to find a way to summon up the emotion befitting what he could give, and I found it very moving. And the visuals were very simpatico. What was your interpretation of the visuals there?
The visuals were kind of like it's starlight, stars, pinprick stars, in the background. Yeah. And then that was also the time when folks brought out their phone flashlights, so there was that first connection between band and audience too. Yes. Right? And that felt familiar.
There you go.
And I think that that's something that had been missing up until that point. It's like, oh yes, we are all in the same room together. We're not just going to be eaten by this screen. So, Bill, I've got to tell you, I mean, there was the visual onslaught of the first three songs, which of course were overwhelming and fantastic. But the end of One, which we were just talking about, that's when the show really gets interesting for me. One ends with Bono starting to sing Love Me Tender.
Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. Make sure you know that I'm wrong in this detail and the other thing. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfilled.
Which was interesting, but of course we had just seen images of Elvis previously in Even Better Than the Real Thing. But then during the performance, you have these images of Priscilla and Elvis getting married, followed by JFK, then followed by a 1960s rocket launch. And I started thinking, what is the correlation here? Because we're going from these images of this sort of pop iconed Elvis, Vegas, American consumerism, to all of a sudden now we are in this Americana Camelot, right? With these images, right? And I was just trying to figure out what is the correlation. And then of course we go to these shots of Earth from space.
Right.
What does this mean? What does this have to do with anything? And then Until the End of the World starts, and we get these images of lightning flashes, storms, right? Yeah. And it was fascinating. It was really interesting. And that's when I became intellectually engaged with the show, because I thought, oh, they might actually be saying something here. I don't know where they're going yet, but this is really fascinating. And the other thing too about the images of Elvis and Priscilla, getting married and Until the End of the World, because to me that tied in with Octung Baby, which of course is so much about interpersonal relationships and marriages that fail. And I thought, oh, what are they saying there? And again, didn't know where we were going, but I was excited. And I thought that song sounded fantastic sonically. I thought all of a sudden it started to work for me. I was paying attention to the music. I was paying attention to the band. The visuals weren't overwhelming the band. It was working with the music. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. And the other thing that was interesting too, visually, is, you've got all this, the lightning is going on during that song. And then all of a sudden there's water. The bottom half of the screen is turning, showing water, sort of the slick looking water. And at that great part of Until the End of the World, that outro, the very beginning of the outro, as soon as that starts, you get that image of a flag with flames.
Yeah.
Right. And it looked apocalyptic. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I thought, oh, this is very apocalyptic looking. So we had this image of the globe before, and then all of a sudden we have fire and water. Fire and water are always apocalyptic.
Yeah. Now, right before that, now, I don't think you got this, but I did, for the big moment that was on the Zoo TV tour, the surrounding me, going down on me. So for my show, he came into the audience. He actually kind of fell into it during that section, did a little snippet of Painted Black, even bit somebody's hand.
Oh, that's cool.
But that was very connective right there, because there wasn't a whole lot of that in what I was kind of monitoring the shows before then. He was kind of back and didn't really, not that he didn't interact, but there wasn't any contact. That kind of broke things down. I liked that. But yes, Until the End of the World, it didn't necessarily have a whole lot to do with Judas and Jesus and that whole thing. As you said, I think it really was more into the apocalyptic transition of the show. Yeah. And
before we go on, I'll just mention that since I saw the show, I have learned that image, which I'm looking at it as the opposite of a white surrender flag, because the flag is on fire.
Yeah.
The piece was called Flare. The artist's name is John Garrett, and it was based on photographs that the artist took of the South Pacific Ocean. And it's meant to be a meditation on the crisis of heating oceans that poses to low-lying lands.
Well, then we're on to something, because certainly, as I said, again, no spoiler alert, but the end of the show visually certainly is very connected to that very idea. And there are other allusions to it, which we will get to.
Indeed.
All right, what is up next?
So who's going to ride your wild horses? And I have to say, I thought this song sounded great, and I was not expecting this song to sound great. I think this song was more successful than it was on Zoo TV tour.
We were talking about this because we both have agreed, even though I think we both liked the song to whatever extent, it never felt like it belonged in the set list, or it didn't work, or it didn't flow properly in the original Zoo TV set list. But yes, I also enjoyed it, and I thought this is one definitely Bono sang wonderfully, and Bram played the hell out of the drums. I don't know if you want to talk about Larry here.
I miss Larry. Bram did a great job. I miss Larry.
We all miss Larry. That I specifically wasn't even sure Larry was even still in U2. That was something that I expressed. I'm not saying that's true, but it was a concern of mine, because, for all these dubious business decisions over the past decade, we were saying to ourselves often, before we even did this podcast, where's Larry to say, guys, are you sure you want to do this? It seemed like that voice wasn't in the room. So there's not clarity on that issue, other than U2 has absolutely gone out of their way to address the optics of not having Larry there. They have referenced him often. He, of course, appeared in the Atomic City video.
Yes.
He's quoted in the tour program.
Mhm. Yep.
He is a presence. They certainly sound like he's going to be drumming for them again as soon as he is well. That's what they're putting forth, and of course, we all hope that, because
Yeah, I'm choosing to believe that, and it did certainly look sincere. I was not at the opening show, but Bono, I suppose, what I've heard is Bono was overcome with emotion when they first mentioned Larry, and I would imagine it would be difficult to not play with your bandmate after 40 plus years for the first time. That would be very emotional. So I like everyone. I think we're all just hoping that Larry recovers and is able to do what he clearly seems that he wants to do and rejoin you too.
Sure. But in fairness, let me just say, I think Bram is a hell of a drummer.
He is.
And they're not doing songs that are so specifically unique to Larry's style. A Sunday Bloody Sunday, or
even bad.
Those would be ones I go, but what is he going to do with that, for instance?
Right.
But he's a hell of a drummer, and I certainly miss Larry's presence, but I will just be fair. The guy played extremely well, and I didn't necessarily feel musically like, oh my God, this is such a substandard, representation of the band. I
didn't either. And it might just be emotional for me that I just missed Larry terribly.
Of course.
But yes, but Bram he's a great drummer. He plays really well with you too. And man, he's good looking.
He's quite fit.
Whew. Whew.
Even I can say that. He's quite fit. All right, moving on now. Where are we going now?
So I think that we should probably mention trying to throw your arms around the world.
Very happy to hear that again.
Yeah.
I do love that song.
Yeah.
Of course, the early versions of this song, I don't remember. Did you get a version where the girl is swinging on the...
No.
They were not.
No, we didn't. It was just Bono strolling around the stage with the balloon, which was really an interesting visual.
Does anyone know what the balloon is? They don't.
I have no idea. I don't know. I know that at the end of Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses, he starts shouting about Jacob's Ladder when the white string is being risen. But I have no idea what that means.
I do not either. I do not either.
I like the balloon. It's cool. It's evocative. To me, it kind of signals innocence, childhood, that sort of thing.
Well, the visual is very Innocence Tour, with that, like the light bulb. It's like
right. That's a good point.
Cartoonish,
that's a good point.
Kind of artistry. Yeah. But
I
don't know specifically what it is.
And I read that Morley Steinberg, who U2's choreographer, Edge's wife, that she's the one that came up with the image of the balloon.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like you say, it's evocative. It's fun to look at. Nobody knows what it's for, though.
And then from there, the band concludes the first part of Achtung Baby, and they go into the interludes.
And it must be said before we do that, now, while Bono has called it Side A, even though it's not Achtung Baby Side A, it is exactly the set list of the first leg of Zoo TV.
I didn't remember that. That's very cool. That's interesting.
Yeah. So that is another thing that is a little connective tissue.
See, that's a nice Easter egg, actually. I'm sure that was done purposefully.
Absolutely.
By them. And I like that a lot, that they did that. I missed it, but I'm glad that you found that.
No, okay. That's what we're here for.
That's cool. So then following, as Bono is calling it, Side A of Achtung Baby, the band goes into what we're calling the interlude. I think that's what people are referring to this as, where they're playing some older material. And Bill, and I think that you and I both had more unique songs that were played at the shows that we saw. I think for most of the shows, they've thus far anyway. They've been playing stuff from Rattle and Hum, including Love Rescue Me, which I remember you texted me the night of the opening show and you said they played Love Rescue Me. And I thought, he's lying. And I thought you were lying for hours until I looked it up independently. I'm like, oh my God, why? Why would they play that song? But so the night that I saw them, they did I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, which was great. But I think the really special things that they did, and I'm saying this, that the person that doesn't like the song Pride,
yes,
the jaunty song.
Oh, yes.
However, the night that I saw the show was the night after the attacks by Hamas on Israel.
Right.
And Pride was a perfect song to play. I think that this has been released on video. A lot of people have seen this. Bono does a wonderful introduction to the song where he says, in light of what's happened in Israel and Gaza, a song about nonviolence seems somewhat ridiculous, even laughable, but our prayers have always been for peace and nonviolence.
Right.
And it was really moving. And it was a great version of the song. And I was moved. Even Pride, it was not my bathroom break song for this show. It was really wonderful. It was truly, truly an amazing festival.
Early morning, October 7th, as the sun is rising in the desert sky, stars of David, they took your life, but they could not take your pride. Could not take your pride. Could not take your pride. Could not take
And it went into MLK, did it?
It went into MLK, and they did a full version, and that was quite special.
Right.
To hear that.
And did they not also illuminate the sphere with the Israeli flag?
Yeah, I didn't actually. I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah,
so that's cool to know.
Right. Interlude, whatever you want to call it. They didn't have a B stage, but this is essentially another connection, a teeny bit, to Zoo TV, in that this is a largely acoustic, loose format.
Yeah.
Portion of the show that has no visuals. It's just them on the sparse stage, in the same way that Zoo TV dialed down for a few songs and just made it a very human connective moment. But the show I got, they start with All I Want Is You, which they have normally been doing and predominantly most of the shows, but then they would do Desire, Angel of Harlem, Love Rescue Me, that sort of thing. So I was ready for that. But instead, after All I Want Is You, they did, of all things, Two Hearts Beat as One. What?
Right.
Seconds, even more. What?
I didn't introduce you. It's because I was going to ask you to sing. Takes a second to say goodbye. Say goodbye. Oh, oh, oh. Takes a second to say goodbye. Say goodbye. Oh, oh, oh. Say goodbye. Where you go tonight? Like flashes across the sky, east to west, you or I, like a thief in the night, see the world again alive.
And then basically the Songs of Surrender version of Sunday Bloody Sunday. So war, in other words.
Yeah.
And Bono had even mentioned, the original idea was, hey, we're going to pick a different record for this section of the show, but it has largely not been that. It has largely been Rattle and Hum, or as he joked that night, I asked Edge which is his favorite album, and he said Greatest Hits. It was very loose, it was sloppy, but in a kind of charming way. I think that portion of the set needs that because everything else is pretty static. Let's be honest. They are to some extent a slave to the innovation because there's a lot that needs to be coordinated.
Yeah,
this is nothing new since Zoo TV. Through every show, through every tour, rather, since there's been to a degree, they've been a little bit of a slave to the visuals because they've been doing these types of tours. Not as much improvisation. So to have a so-called interlude or B stage is a nice escape from that, or a reprieve from that.
Oh, agree.
Yeah,
absolutely. Spontaneity is wonderful. Although I have to say, before we leave the interlude portion, I wonder if they're doing so much of the Rattle and Hum stuff because they're remastering that film. I think they're getting ready to redo it for streaming.
Gosh, I hope they add all those great outtakes. Put them in the bus on the way to the church. I hope they have at least 5 or 6 hours of that.
Oh my God. Some of the most boring film I've ever seen in my life. Yes.
Spoiler alert. Oh, do we eviscerate that?
Oh, man.
All right. That has nothing to do with this episode. Okay.
It does not. But I wonder about that.
Yeah,
so then following the interlude, Bono says something to the effect of, we're waking up the baby, and they go into the second part of the album.
So they do at your show, I think they did So Cruel at this point. In mine, they did Acrobat. And may I just say, I was like literally the one song I wanted to hear more than anything was So Cruel. So when they did Acrobat at this point, I go, oh my God, are they not doing So Cruel?
Right.
But we'll do your set list. Acrobat, I think I've told you it's actually not my favorite song, and I know that's heresy to most people. But it was a great version. I mean, Edge just plays the crap out of that song.
Yeah.
And as I said, he was really loud on this for me in where I was. So I really love that.
No, that's great.
It was actually a really good version. I
enjoyed it. I enjoyed it too. I have to say that this is one thing where I want to point out the stage again, because I know you didn't see as much of the stage as I did. The stage was doing cool things up until this point, kind of doing block colors that were great. But on this song, there were sort of these graphic images of the band in close-up being shown on the stage. And I think that it was my favorite, one of my favorite visuals of the night. It was so cool because it was so unexpected.
Yeah, well, the one thing that I cannot see is the stage itself,
the top of it,
the top of the stage. So I never got the any of those images. So that's the one bummer of being on the floor.
Yeah, but it was cool, and it was unexpected too, because I was like, oh, I didn't know the stage was going to do that. But it was great.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and then okay, so now we get into So Cruel,
right?
And as much as I wanted to see it, I have to say I was fearful that it was not going to be as great, just because they're older or whatever. Like I was very fearful of that. I actually thought Bono sang the hell out of this one. I really loved this. Edge, he's playing real piano, which is another thing. Like they could have done the piano on a loop or something, but he's really playing it, and then he drops out, I think, after the second verse, and does that little tremolo part, which I love. I just thought it was a great version, and I was very relieved because, like I said, that really was. I mean, other than the Hershey, Pennsylvania rehearsal before the second leg of the Zoo TV tour, we have no full band version, so this is it. And we had been tweeted. Gavin Friday was saying this is going to be highlight. I'm like, yeah, hyperbole, but it really was for me. Like, I thought they nailed it.
Cross the line. Who pushed who over? It doesn't matter. You floating. I'm only hanging on to watch you go down. My love, I disappeared in you.
I agree. I agree with everything that you just said. And I love the really forward harmony vocal that Edge did too.
That's
I
right.
thought that
He
was
did.
great.
He did add that, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Her skin is pale like God's only dove. Screams like an angel for your love. Then she makes you watch her from above. And you need her like a drug. You say in love there are no rules.
So yeah,
So,
all
agreed.
good there.
Yeah.
And,
And then,
we where's it go?
Ultraviolet.
Right, which you hate, and
No, I mean,
I know you don't hate it. I'm
no,
sorry.
I don't hate it. I mean, it sounded really good. I thought it sounded great.
No, I had to give you shit for that.
I know.
'Cause
know.
I
Well, you don't
adore
like
it.
acrobats, so there you go.
All right, fair enough. I don't hate it, like just like you, but no, I love Ultraviolet. I actually thought it was better here than 360. I thought 360 for Ultraviolet with the hanging microphone. I thought that was like a little, like, I just play the song. Like I love the song. You don't need all this. And this was just like a pure version of the song. I enjoyed it a lot. And I thought this is one Bono sang I thought really well. And Edge is always good, so it's like superfluous to say that.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I thought this was actually one of the highlights for me.
It was a good song. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. And then came Love Is Blindness, which was, I thought, an amazing version.
Well, we both agree that was an absolute highlight. It was on Zoo TV. It was here. It may have been the very best song performed of the night. If I was push came to shove, as much as I love So Cruel, but Love Is Blindness is sublime. I mean, it really is.
Love is blindness. I don't wanna see what you recognize around me. Oh, my heart is blind. In a park car.
It is, and Edge sounded amazing. So did Adam.
Yep.
We haven't mentioned Adam. Adam was
We
great.
haven't.
Adam was great. We haven't mentioned Adam. Adam was great this whole show.
With
He was
his fly
smiley and
sneakers.
sparkling. Yeah, he looked fantastic, and he was great. He was a wonderful presence. I can't believe we didn't mention Adam, but he sounded good on this song as well.
No, he really did. And I didn't even mention him, 2 hearts in seconds. I mean, all I needed to do was New Year's Day, although you wouldn't have liked it. But like those are the 3 greatest bass lines on War, or maybe even of his whole career. So
Right.
yeah, shame on me for not even mentioning that. I didn't- But
So,
yeah, Love Is Blindness, and of course the solo, Edge's solo on Love Is Blindness is, I mean, it's top shelf.
Always. but I think we have to mention the visual here.
Right.
From Ultraviolet, the sphere has gone this sort of ultraviolet blue color, I
Right.
guess. And that's where it starts with Love is Blindness. And then during Love is Blindness, these nighttime insects, these giant nighttime insects,
That's right.
start to land on the sphere. And I hate bugs. And I thought, oh, this is going to be bad. But it really worked for me because first of all, it plays into the, won't you wrap the night around me, right?
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
And it's also this more of these connections with the natural world. And
which again, we're kind of not giving it away where it ends with the end of the show.
But it's all building up that there's
exactly.
something amiss here.
Yes.
Right.
There's something ominous.
Something's out of whack going on.
Exactly. It's funny. You detected this much earlier than me, but this was the moment when I went, oh, okay, I'm starting to get where we're going here.
Yeah. But it was really effective. And
it was.
And the moths that would land and their wings would flutter, and more moths would land and their wings would flutter. I mean, it was powerful. And even if somebody's listening to this and they don't like bugs, you'll be okay. I'm terrified.
But yes, it was that sort of Hitchcockian birds,
yes,
sort of enveloping doom, feeling of doom. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But I know I'm being a little literal, but I thought, oh, wrap the night around me. That's pretty brilliant.
Right.
This is a great visual interpretation. Right. So Love is Blindness ends with all of the band members walking off the stage, and then off stage, Bono sings a minor key version of Viva Las Vegas, which I found amusing, actually, to do that song in a minor key.
Well, it's important to finally mention Elvis. I mean, I haven't even mentioned him yet, right? No.
No, I haven't mentioned him at all. So, and then of course they go into the encore, which starts with Elevation, which, Elevation's great. I don't know if there's anything else to say. I thought it sounded great. It was fun. It's always fun.
Right. I mean, we all, as old fans, we have, oh my God, why didn't they do Out of Control? Or what? Right. I mean, listen, let's be realistic here. They're going to play something, a little bit more modern, one of the hits. Obviously, they do Vertigo in there. We'll get to, but of course, let's be realistic here. Elevation is a fine song. It's fun.
And I think to speak to that point, it's a good point because U2, they know that there's going to be a lot of casual fans. There's going to be a lot of non-fans at these shows, right?
In fact, that's a very good point. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over you, but yes, I wanted to bring that up. The Sphere is a fascination. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest here. There were, and I saw this for myself, not an overwhelming amount, but absolutely there was a segment of the audience. They were fascinated with this thing called U2 with this thing called the Sphere. Right. There was absolutely a thing that night.
Absolutely right. And the encore is their payoff because they're probably going to know all of these songs.
Exactly.
Except for Atomic City, but we'll get to them. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I thought Elevation it's fun, right? I love that song live. I do. And it was a great way to end with My Way, which is much more Sid Vicious than Frank Sinatra, which I think was very, very appropriate.
Sure.
And, we're going to be talking about the visuals. During Elevation, the night creatures are still covering the sphere, and then during My Way, they all fly away, and that's when we see that pretty much now that iconic image that you see Las Vegas out the sphere. So, and I don't actually know if the view that you're seeing would be the view from the sphere. That I don't know. I would imagine it probably
I think it's a little further back, if I'm not mistaken, because I was thinking that. For
sure. And then, of course, you go into Atomic City, which makes perfect sense. Right.
Right. Are you going to let me talk about Atomic City, or you just hit me with a
you know what, you start and then I'll do the cleanup after. How about that?
Melody, it's jaunty. It's absurd that you are trying to keep on the record that pride is jaunty while Atomic City exists in this world.
It's a pop rock song.
It's jaunty.
It's like, okay, it might be jaunty, but so is Pride. But go on. What do you think of Atomic City now that we're here?
It's a brave move by the Irish lads to roll out Atomic City wedged between classics like Elevation and Streets, or like what? I mean, it's just, I'm sorry, like it's just not a good song.
I think it's all right. I think it's a world better than the last two singles that they released. What is it? The Your Song Saved My Life, and what was the other one? The Ashima. I'm completely ruining that title. I don't remember what it's called. That's terrible.
In the history of U2, it is the standard of excellence. Well, it's okay. It's not terrible. Like, is that the standard we've been left with? Come on.
Hey, they have songs like The Blackout, so it's not like this is the first clunker they've done. But,
let's not jump ahead. Let's not.
All right. That's true. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't offend me. How about that?
I commend them for putting out a new song. I will always support an artist, and U2 has always been on point with let's keep pushing new stuff. I'm always in favor of that. Unfortunately, this song is not good for me.
Okay.
However, the visuals are kind of cool. This is where
very cool.
This is where the city landscape recedes into the desert. Fabulous. Deconstruct. Thank you. That I loved. I thought that was fabulous. Loved it.
And you are left with this desert scene, and when they go into Vertigo, which is the next song, that's still what you're looking at is the desert.
Now I thought this was going to be Streets.
Mm-hmm.
Because of it's receded in the desert. Did that bother you at all, or am I overthinking it?
No, well, they did the bit where they had the helicopters that came out, and the helicopter spotlights were used as the stage spotlight. So to me, it was still a little bit, it was the desert, but they were still kind of doing interesting things with helicopters, and it wasn't quite serious enough for Streets, if that makes any sense. Not quite yet.
It makes sense. I just thought that was the natural. We recede into the desert and we're left there, and that seemed like a natural place for it. And it's a little odd, Vertigo into Streets, I'll just say.
Yeah, no, I see that.
A little bit of a strange transition. It didn't ruin the show for me. It just kind of something I thought. And Vertigo, like Elevation, it's a fine song. There's nothing wrong with that song.
It's fun.
It's rocking. Let's not over intellectualize it. We don't need to do that.
I was happy to hear it.
But be that as it may, then we get to Streets. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this on the Joshua Tree episode. Let's just tell it like it is. This is one of the great iconic moments of any rock concert. That intro always sends shivers, and it is always not just your own personal experience, but your experience with others who are sitting there with you, and they're receiving this chilling and all at once uplifting riff for the ages. It is communal. And when I said before about I was waiting for a moment where I could say, yeah, this is my U2 experience. I mean, I'll just be honest. This absolutely confirmed it. It's not that I didn't feel it before, but it's like, okay, this feels like any other show from 1987 to 1997 to 2007.
Mm-hmm.
This feels exactly like what I've always felt. It's a communal, uplifting moment, and gotta say, I loved it.
Yeah, no, I did too. And I think that they used the visuals very well. There was still a backdrop of the desert, but from the desert, another flag rose. This time it was a white flag. It was definitely the iconic surrender flag that's being used. Yes. Although it looked like it was the flag itself was made from, I don't know, water vapor or steam, something like that. But it was quite beautiful. And so I thought, oh, this is nice. They're using this desert motif along with the white flag. These are great iconic images. And it was beautiful. It was lovely.
And from here we go to With or Without You.
Yeah, With or Without You, which the visuals were still in the desert. It was another day had risen in the desert. which I thought was beautiful. But the land again receded during these visuals, and water again covers the land, the desert. So it's covered in water.
And
but before we go on to, there's another sphere in the distance. But before we get to that, the song itself I thought sounded great.
Well, you know my feelings about that song.
Yeah.
I do love it. That is another communal moment. I mean, it's hard to not involuntarily feel your arms outstretched. You kind of can't help it. And when you know me, Melody, it's like I've always been self-conscious, about my association with U2, the haters, and my association with the indie rock scene. I will own this. One of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is to say, to hell with this garbage. I want to own this moment. I feel it's important. I have to force myself in these moments to go, I have to let it go. And I did, and it felt fantastic. It was exaltation.
That is wonderful.
I let myself go, and it felt so good. And I have to credit part of this to you and to us collectively doing this podcast, owning, because we are both, let's be honest, we're both a little self-conscious about things. But U2 is something we share, and maybe they're not perfect. Maybe they are confounding at times, beguiling at others, but they are a constant in our lives. And I just want to take this moment to where I really forced myself to say, I'm going to give myself over to this moment. And it was a beautiful moment. And
Indeed.
and God damn it, I'll just say, it's like when that moment came, I was arms outstretched. Just give it to me.
I agree. It was wonderful. And I think that there was such a powerful image going on, which we'll talk about. But I don't think that it overwhelmed the band. I think that the music added to the visual added to the music in this case. So you kind of do need to be there for this. This was so enveloping when, as we mentioned, there was a smaller sphere off in the distance once the land had been reclaimed by water, which got closer and closer to the screen. A circular section of that sphere opened, and the entire sphere was enveloped by this amazing image, which is called Nevada Arc. The artist name is Ez Devlin, and it is a black, I guess sepia toned black and white image of endangered species from Nevada. And you are surrounded by these creatures. It is a transcendent moment.
And that's where conceptually, as we've been teasing all along, that you understand what this has all been leading towards, that the visuals have been reflecting on the ramifications of climate change.
Yeah, you get it. So if you don't have anything else for With or Without You, they end the show with Beautiful Day.
Which I initially, when I saw the set list, and of course I'm not seeing the show, I was like, really? Not that it's a bad song, but it never felt like a concluding song. But I think in context of this, it did make sense.
It did, and it was very uplifting feeling. The images, the sepia tone of the endangered species that are now surrounding you in the sphere, colors come out on to them, which of course is matching, and the colors came out. Yes. Right, exactly. But and that sounds hokey, I guess, if you're saying it like that, but it was very, very powerful. The lights are on. It's very bright in there. It's very communal.
Right.
It's a very positive moment, a moment of hope. Whereas if you start looking at this show in retrospect, it's a pretty heavy show. There's a lot of dark moments visually, and you end on a quite optimistic tone.
But may I just say, I believe, and I think you agree, that U2, and particularly Bono, went into these shows with a conscious decision to pare down at least, the outward vocal politicism of U2 shows and let the more subtle visuals tell a story rather than, him orating, shall we say.
Indeed, which was different from previous tours, which of course were overtly political. And then the question is, were they soft selling the idea of the catastrophic damage done by climate change? Because truly, if you didn't want to see what these visuals represent, you didn't have to.
Oh, I think they absolutely were soft selling it consciously.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's hitting you over the head if you don't want it to. And I think this plays back to the question of, does this feel like a U2 show?
Certainly by the encore, I was recognizing something familiar, comforting, and necessary for my U2 experience. It and it wasn't, was the political box checked? It was, am I getting the communal connection? Am I getting the human connection? I got enough of the innovation or the technological advancement and enveloping and all this, but did I get enough of that human element that I rely so heavily on and I need? And if it doesn't check that box for me, why am I there?
I mean, I agree. I came down on, it was a different type of U2 show, but I did indeed feel that it had that heart, as you're saying, community that a U2 show must have.
Right. Now, let's talk about what are we looking at here? Like, what does the future portend? To me, I am convinced this was a great business venture and artistic. Let's be fair. Mm-hmm. This was a fabulous decision on U2's part, and they knocked it out of the park. Let's talk about, though, what is the future for U2, or for that matter, the Sphere, and who else could do this?
I mean, I think that there are some artists that could probably draw enough crowd to fill the Sphere on a residency basis. But, I think that what you're talking about is sort of the bigger picture too. Will there be more spheres built in different cities? I know certainly that's what's being discussed.
Right.
And then how does it affect the future of live music?
Right. Exactly.
In general.
Not club bands. We're talking about bigger bands that face the question of, do I set off on a 3-month tour?
Right. Exactly.
That's what we're talking about here.
Right.
Let's start with U2. I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, you point out that they have a 2-year option.
Mm-hmm. They do. They have a 2-year option to continue at the Sphere if they choose.
So the question is that a continuation of this, or is this another venture, i.e. a new album and a residency at the Sphere?
Right. And then you're getting into questions of who gets to see live music, right? I mean, when you have touring bands, large touring bands, it's very expensive anyway. So again, as you mentioned, we're not talking about clubs. We're not talking about music at that level. We're talking about larger acts. Yeah. A lot of people already can't see shows. Live music is something that is for folks who are fortunate enough to have expendable cash, right? But now you're adding this expense of traveling.
Yeah.
Who gets to see these shows?
Well, people with money is the short answer, right? But it goes deeper than that, because by making it, a one destination, take it or leave it proposition, they created a feeding frenzy. I mean, it wasn't like putting tickets on sale for a 40-city tour where it's just, fans trying to get tickets for their city show. Knowing it was going to be only these shows at the Sphere, it was literally millions across the world, all trying to get tickets at the same time, pretty much. And as you said, add the cost of getting to Vegas and a hotel to boot. And if you couldn't get tickets, then you've got to pay the pauper, and whether it be, StubHub or Vibby or whoever. And let's face it, in this era, U2 is now in a demographic, an older demographic, who they want their bottle service, their VIP. They don't mind paying more. They want something that will give them something special, and they don't mind paying for it. That's great for you, but what about the fan that doesn't have that economic advantage?
It's a problem, and I think that kind of what we're talking about is this the future? Are there going to be spheres in certain metropolitan areas. Well, we have one in Las Vegas. Maybe you'll have one in New York, in London, Hong Kong,
Right.
what have you.
Exactly.
And I don't think that we can answer that question. Obviously, it's touring in reverse, right? The audience is coming to the artist.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what will they'll do. And then the other thing that I think about too is, will these spectacles, maybe not with U2, but in the future, will these spectacles overpower music?
Well, that goes back to what I said. It's like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And so it does come back to, is it in the hands of an artist that has a taste level that's not going to make it gross and overwhelming? And does it even matter that the band is there? Or is it just, remember back in LA in the early 80s, the thing called Laserium? Do you remember this?
I do.
You'd go up to Griffith Park Observatory and you're just like, let's take some acid and just listen to music while we watch these visuals. Like, that's enough. Like, I mean, for me, like, I'm sorry, like, I know I'm get off your lawn guy, but like a concert tour was, and for me, special because it is something that's conceived. It's something that evolves. There's a tenor to it as it goes from town to town. And God knows Bono always reacted to the moment, the city, the elements. In the Sphere, of course, a marvelous thing, but it's static. It's highly conceptualized. You are, to a degree, a slave to, the production. And this isn't anything new. I mean, like, Innocence and Experience had that, whatever you call it, that long, thin,
the screen, the
screen, so I understand it's nothing new. Zoo TV to an extent, I get it, but at the same time, is this the future? Not just for U2, but all major acts.
And it's a big question. Obviously we can't answer that. But you mentioned before, of course, this was a great business decision as well as artistic decision for U2. Huge moneymaker for them.
Oh God, yes.
And talking of how much, I mean, so Dolan paid them reportedly $10 million for the residency, right? Live Nation reportedly is paying them $4 million per show. And then they're also taking 90% of the proceeds from each show. That is a lot of money.
And again, like I said, let's not forget, this Sphere is a massive, gorgeous, illuminating the sky advertisement during the course of this run. There's not, when you're there, when you take off from the airport, Melody, you see that Sphere. That's what you see. It's a landmark now.
It's huge. It is huge. Yeah. But getting back to the money, I don't begrudge them for their money.
I'm not saying I begrudge them. What I'm saying is they've come so far from the conundrum that they faced on Zoo TV, which was a 4% profit margin.
But on the flip side, though, is because this was so well done, and it was, this show has made them relevant again.
Yes, it has. They're a talking point. They're a TikTok moment. They're an Instagram moment. Nobody's talking about Bono being annoying. No one's talking about putting their music into the Apple library. That's now pushed off to the side. And I think Bono learned something on the book tour performance. He's jovial. He doesn't feel so insecure. I've got to put across an agenda. I don't have to check boxes having to do with, the One campaign. And I'm not belittling that by any means. I'm just saying, I think there's a conscious decision to let's take a step back from that. Let's let U2, the brand, reap the rewards that we deserve at this point after 40 years of service.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. And then the other thing I think that to mention is it's quite a trick that they pulled off, that these are guys who are in their early 60s in a rock and roll band, who are pushing the envelope forward on artistic performance and technology.
Well, they always have, and I will give them credit that it's still a priority.
But what does it mean? Will they continue with the Sphere?
That is the question.
I think we don't know. I mean, there are rumblings in the U2 camp, interviews that they've given that they plan to tour again. But will they after this? I don't know.
I don't know. Like I said, if I was in their shoes, to be fair, I would be thinking to myself, why do I want the hassle? Like what if there was, if not the Sphere, what if there was a venue in every continent? Europe, in Asia, in Australia. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And who knows if that will happen before U2 eventually retires. Who knows?
Understood.
And what makes me sad about that? I mean, am I stuck sort of in my old ways that rock and roll bands should tour or bands should tour? Maybe. But also what makes me sad is, not as many people will be able to experience certain levels of live music. And that makes me sad if that's indeed the future.
100%. And I hope that's among the things they're debating amongst themselves. I'll just throw it back to you, though, in that regard. What if U2's next venture is a new record at the Sphere?
Would I go? Yeah.
Yeah, well, you and I can drive there in 4.5 hours.
We can. But let's say their next venture was at the New Sphere in London.
Yeah.
Would I be able to see this show? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would. And that would be a bummer. And listen, I feel bad for fans that can't see this show.
Right. Well, listen, I'm just going to say a few friends of the podcast have already reached out. They have said, I just cannot go to this show.
Yeah.
And that makes me very sad.
Makes me sad too. Because, even if they do, if they film one of the shows and it's streamed somewhere, it won't be the same.
Like they always do, or usually do, some sort of tour souvenir. This is the one that really cannot be captured on film. Even though I've seen some great, drone footage and that looks great. And of course, but this actually cannot be compared.
Yeah.
Like that much I will give the Sphere and this whole thing. You cannot possibly compare this to any tour. It is its own thing. And when they look down the annals of U2 tours, here's the Boy tour, here's the War tour. This cannot even be quantified. It's right. It's its own thing.
Indeed. And I mean, I just feel badly. I feel badly for fans that have been fans as long as you and I have, and they would love to go to this, but they can't for many reasons, economic or otherwise.
All right. Well, I think we've done it here, Melody.
I think so. I think we have.
Why don't you take it home?
Well, I'm just going to invite everyone to join us next time on Into the Heart of U2 podcast.